Okay, guys, I am going to hopefully be able to talk you through how to do the assignment for inferencing. When you're inferencing, you're pretending like you're a detective. You are just trying to figure out what's going on based on the clues that you're given. And we're starting with the easiest one, which is where you're just looking at pictures. You don't have to read anything. So we're going to use clues to figure things out. And I'm going to go over your assignment, the examples and everything, and talk you through so that you know exactly what you're doing. So first of all, when we start out looking at this picture, we see a guy riding a bicycle, and it looks like he's standing up to ride the bicycle. It doesn't even really look like there's a seat on it, but it looks like he's standing up riding the bike. And you know when you are riding a bike standing up, you can go faster usually than if you're sitting down pedaling. So the guy's standing up riding a bike, and that kind of tells us that he's sort of in a hurry. And back here in the background, we see a guy that I'm going to guess is the Pope. He's a religious figure in the Catholic religion. He's like the head of the Catholic Church, and he's got his hand up like he's waving, or maybe he's blessing the people. There's some kind of fancy thing back here, but I don't know what that is. And then over here we have a microphone. These kind of look like steps leading up to where the Pope is. So this guy's really close to the Pope. And then back here you see this fancy building. And just to give you a little bit of history, and that's why I use this one for an example, the Pope usually addresses people when he's in Vatican City, which is where the Pope lives. He addresses people generally from the church. So this is probably a big Catholic church that's in Vatican City. And I don't expect you to know that. That's why I'm just telling you that. So we're going to start out with what we see. So to start with, you're going to make a chart, and I've already made the chart for you. And we're going to put what we actually see on the left, and then what we can infer or what we can figure out based on that clue on the right. So the first thing we saw was the kid riding the bicycle. So we're going to infer or guess that maybe he needs to get somewhere fast. He didn't want to walk because he's in a hurry. So then we go on down, and remember the Pope was sitting outside. The guy's riding the bicycle outside, and when you look up here, you don't see any windows or doors or anything. So the Pope's right out there with him. So the Pope is sitting outside. And so with his hand up in the air, maybe he's blessing people. I could probably have added the Pope sitting outside and he has one hand in the air here. And so maybe he's blessing people. He's doing something outside where he wants people to see him. And then if you look at the expression on the kid's face, he's not smiling. So he looks like he's pretty serious. And so maybe he's serious. I could infer or I could guess that maybe he shouldn't be riding there. So he's concentrating really hard on getting away from where he's at. And then we talked about the kid standing up riding the bike. And that could mean that he's rushing. And then the Pope is smiling. And if you look back at the expression on his face, you can't see him real good, but he doesn't look mad. So maybe he's smiling. So maybe he thinks it's kind of funny that the kid's riding there. And remember the microphone. And so the Pope may be getting ready to make a speech because it wasn't, if you look at the position of the microphone, see it's turned over towards the side, so he's not talking to anybody yet. So maybe he's getting ready to make a speech. And then there's steps, and it looks like it's kind of a fancy place. And that's what I had told you before about the Pope usually speaks from the Vatican, so they're probably in Vatican City at the church. So from that picture, I used all the details I could find, and then based on my detective skills, I'm going to say that this picture, from this picture, I can tell the following story. The boy riding the bike went to hear the Pope speak from the Vatican one day and accidentally got too close. He kind of took a wrong turn, and he wound up where he shouldn't have been. So the TV stations and all the reporters were already there, and one of them took this picture that showed the Pope had a sense of humor because he was smiling at the boy rather than getting mad. Now, do I know if any of this is 100% accurate? No. But as long as I've looked at all the evidence, what I have decided is believable. And that's what inferencing is all about. You're making an educated guess based on the evidence you have. Now, some people confuse inferencing and predicting. An inference is what you can figure out is going on now based on the picture. A prediction is where you tell some based on what you see, what you think is going to happen next. So what we are doing is just figuring out what's going on in these pictures. We're not predicting what's going to happen next. Now, I might predict that security guards are going to stop him and escort him off the property and he won't get to hear the Pope speak. I might could infer that the Pope would stand up and step in on behalf of this guy, and maybe he would get to hear the Pope speak, but that's all predictions, and we're not doing that right now. All we're doing is inferring. We're telling what's going on in this picture based on the clues that we can see in the picture. Okay, so let's go down and look at the next one. So this one is a black and white picture, and automatically you think of old times as, you know, black and white pictures. And what do we see here? We see big tall buildings, so we know that this lake is near a big city. And you can see like the grassy spot coming down to the lake. So this is probably a place where people went to have fun. You can see boats here and maybe some back here in the background. So people went here for boating. And then you see scuba divers up here in the front. Maybe this is one back here, maybe one here, maybe back in there, maybe right there. So there's all kinds of scuba divers all in this water. And people who scuba dive generally are looking for something, whether it's for fun or whether it's their job. So what do I see? I see that the lake is near a big city. And so I can infer that that's a spot where people go for fun. And there are people in boats on the lake. And what I can infer from that is that one of the big activities on the lake is boating, because that's what people are out there doing. They're not swimming, they're boating. Then the last thing, there are scuba divers on the lake. And so I can kind of infer or guess that the divers are looking for something that's in the lake. So based on what I'm seeing, I'm going to give you two versions. The first one is that some people were out on the lake in boats having fun, and they dropped something valuable overboard, and divers were called in to find the lost object. Now, you can even go so far for my creative people that like to come up with big stories, and I've got a lot of you out there, and I really appreciate that because I like reading the interesting stuff. So I could develop this whole story that there was a man and he was proposing marriage to a woman and giving her a huge diamond ring. And the lady got excited and stood up in the boat, and it caused it to rock and almost tip. And then a man tried to steady the boat, but when he did, the ring flew out of his hand and into the water, and it was worth millions. So divers were called in to find it. So that's the story that I came up with based on this picture. And again, do I know if it's 100% true? Absolutely not. But the story is believable based on what I see. Now, I didn't say what happened next, so I didn't predict. I just inferred, or I figured out what was going on in this picture based on what I could see. So now we're going to go on down to where it's your turn, and I'll talk you through these quickly so you can kind of get an idea of what we're doing here. And if you're good, you can go ahead and end this video tutorial and go ahead with your work. But if you need to stick around for a little bit for some more explanation, I'll help you out with these also. So I'm going to give you the details on this first picture, and then you tell me what you can infer or figure out based on those details. And I don't know if I can scroll where you can see, yeah. So the kids are outside, obviously. So what could you infer if the kids are outside? You could infer that what they're doing can't be done inside, maybe, something like that. Okay, then the kids have balloons, and the balloons you can see have notes tied to them. See, you can see all these notes back and through there where I'm putting the cursor. So there's notes all through here. So what can you infer that they're doing if they have balloons with notes on them. They're sending the messages to someone or to people, right? So then the last one, the balloons are being released into the air. So they're not just going out and holding these notes up in the air, they're releasing them. You see, you can see this one, you can see all these are all flying away, and this boy's getting ready to release his. So they're sending these notes out somewhere. And when you send notes out somewhere, you on balloons especially, you don't know where they're going to land. You're not real sure where they're going to go. So you could infer several different things. Maybe they're sending notes out that are really positive. Maybe they're sending notes hoping that they'll land somewhere where somebody's kind of down on their luck. Maybe somebody's having a hard time and they're writing notes on the balloons like, somebody's thinking about you. I thought about you today. Keep your chin up, stay positive, kind of things like that. Or they could have had a teacher or a classmate. Someone could have passed away. They could have died. And maybe they're sending these notes because lots of times people do that at funerals or on anniversaries of a death. They'll send these things out. So you could infer either of those. So now, after you get finished telling me what you can infer from each of these are the baby steps. Tell me a sentence or two to tell me what is happening in that picture. Okay? And again, we're not predicting that someone is going to be really sad and they're going to get the note. We're not predicting. You're going to tell me what is going on in this picture based on those clues. Okay, just what's going on here. Um, the balloons were being released into the air. They had to go outside to do this activity because they wanted people who were far away to get these messages. And then you can infer that they're messages that are hopeful, maybe because this kid's smiling. We didn't put that detail down here, but you could infer based on that maybe they're happy messages. Okay, so then we go on to the next one. Now, what you see here, you can see the storm clouds in the back, and this is kind of like a creepy color. And you can see all these alpacas here, and they're in a herd. They're all in a group, and you can see a man walking down towards them. So, what do you see here that makes you think that this man is a farmer? What in here tells you that maybe he's a farmer? And I will tell you, alpacas, they're domestic farm animals. They're not wild animals. Okay, then there's a storm coming. What tells you that the storm is coming? And then the alpacas are afraid. If you infer alpacas are afraid, what do you see here that makes you think that these alpacas are afraid? How are they standing? Where are they standing? That makes you think that they could be afraid. And then you write a sentence or two and you explain what's happening in this picture. Don't predict, but explain what's happening in this picture based on this evidence that we came up with. Okay, and then the last one, I've given you the exact number of boxes. You won't need any extra boxes. So this is a high diving board. Here's a low diving board. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 men jumping off of a diving board. And they're all jumping at about the same time. It's not like one at a time like a public pool. And you can kind of see back here, this sort of looks like a stage. You can see like the fancy little decorations around this big hole, and there's a curtain there. So it's some kind of a stage maybe. So you tell me what you see and what you can infer or figure out in this picture based on that. And then I give you the conclusion down here. So based on what I've observed or seen, I can conclude that the men jumping are circus performers doing their performance jumping in a pool. So that's what I've figured out. So now you tell me what 3 things you see. And now we're doing baby steps. And then what can you infer that leads you to this conclusion, this big picture? and I hope that's helped you guys. So if you have any questions, make sure